Graham, what a pleasure to have this opportunity to talk with you. Hello, welcome.
Thank you. It's a delight to be with you.
I have enjoyed your work over the years immensely, and I know that there are millions of others that are in the same boat. And real quickly, there's so many interviews with you that are current, that are going around. David Wilcock has one, Carrie Cassidy has a couple. And so I don't really want to get into a lot of that part of it. I have some specific questions that I haven't really heard you answer yet. But I would like you to give just a little brief background real quickly of where you came from and how you got to where you are for those who have not known of you.
Sure. Well, back in the 70s and 80s, I was a mainstream journalist. My last full-time post as a journalist was as the East Africa correspondent for The Economist, based in Nairobi in Kenya. And I was very much focused on current affairs, politics, wars, famines, business, the whole story of current affairs journalism. I used to travel very widely around the East African region, and my travels took me to Ethiopia. And in Ethiopia, in 1983, I stumbled across an extraordinary story. Ethiopia claims to possess the lost Ark of the Covenant, and it's no minor claim. It's absolutely central to Ethiopian culture and religion. And I began to investigate this really as a sideline for quite a number of years during the 1980s. But this was really when I switched tack from current affairs into ancient mysteries. And from 1989, I really began to work intensively on a book about the Ethiopian claim to possess the Ark of the Covenant. And that book was published in 1992, and it's called The Sign and the Seal, A Quest for the Lost Ark of the Covenant. And by that point, I was completely out of current affairs and totally focused on ancient mysteries. And my next book, and certainly my best-known book, published in 1995, was Fingerprints of the Gods, which considers the possibility of a lost civilization, that there might have been a huge forgotten episode in human history, which I date back to the end of the last ice age, more than 12,000 years ago. And in the subsequent years, I wrote a series of other books further examining and finessing this issue, culminating in 2002 with a book called Underworld, which documented 6 years of scuba diving, looking for ruined structures underwater, which is quite a rational thing to do because sea level rose by 400 feet at the end of the last ice age. And if we'd lost the whole civilization, the remains of it are likely to be underwater on the submerged continental shelves. After that, I wrote my last non-fiction book, which is called Supernatural: Meetings with the Ancient Teachers of Mankind, which looks at shamanism and altered states of consciousness and their role in the development of human culture. And various experiences that I had during the researching and writing of Supernatural led me in the direction of my latest venture, which is my first work of fiction, a fantasy adventure, sci-fi, time-slip novel called Entangled, that has just been published in the United States.
Yes, and I'm reading it, and we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that background. That was fabulous. Real quickly, I want to put in a plug that the History Channel is in its second season of a show called Ancient Aliens, and on November 11th, they were featuring, I would say, a lot of your work. So you can put in a plug for that.
Yeah, I've participated in both series of the Ancient Aliens program, and they were talking to me about in the most recent series about my research into underwater ruins.
And it was very well done. Enjoyed it a lot. Okay, at this point, I would like you to give the explanation of what encouraged you to switch from fiction to nonfiction.
Well, it was a combination of things. In my long-term project investigating the possibility of a lost civilization, I felt that I'd gone about as far as anybody could go, particularly after doing 6 years of scuba diving, often in very difficult and dangerous conditions. And I felt there was a danger if I carried on with that investigation that I would end up simply repeating myself and going over the same ground again and again and again. So I decided to move on, and the moving on, as I mentioned a moment ago, was in the direction of another non-fiction book looking at shamanism and altered states of consciousness. And in order to research that book properly, I went down to the Amazon jungle, and I drank the powerful visionary brew known as ayahuasca, the vine of souls, with shamans in the Amazon. They believe that this brew opens a secret doorway inside our minds through which we may peer through into the spirit world. And from my point of view, the spirit world is pretty much the same idea that quantum physicists have when they talk about parallel universes or parallel worlds. And I really had some very extraordinary experiences working with shamans and drinking ayahuasca, and I began to research the whole subject of altered states of consciousness in great depth. And I came across the research of Dr. Rick Strassman at the University of New Mexico, who gave the hallucinogen dimethyltryptamine, DMT, which is the active ingredient of ayahuasca, to human volunteers during a 5-year study in the 1990s. And the conclusion that Rick Strassman came to is really quite explosive. Remember, this is mainstream medical research which was being done here. But he was stunned to find that many of his volunteers, in the trance-like state that DMT induces, appeared to be traveling to the same parallel universes, the same parallel realms, and meeting the same intelligent entities, and coming back and giving descriptions and reports of them. And Rick was therefore forced to consider the possibility that these might not be artifacts of the human brain. They might actually be real perceptions of other levels of reality that are not normally accessible to our senses. And what adds to this possibility is that DMT is in fact a natural neurohormone of the human body. It is produced in the pineal gland, the mysterious pineal gland in the brain. And the suggestion is that what it's doing there is providing the possibility to retune the receiver wavelength of the brain and pick up a wider reality than is normally accessible to our senses. So in this were the germs of the sci-fi novel that I've now written, that parallel worlds, parallel realms, perhaps even other times in history, might become accessible to our consciousness in altered states. And the final step for me was to go back to Brazil in 2006 and have 5 further sessions with the Vine of Souls, with ayahuasca, in which I specifically set the intent. Can I write a novel? And if I do write a novel, what would it be about? And during those 5 ceremonies, I had a series of extraordinarily powerful visions, which effectively gave me the whole story that I have now written down in the novel Entangled. And not only gave me the central characters, 2 young women, one living 24,000 years ago in the Stone Age, one living today, whose destinies and fates are intertwined, brought together by supernatural forces to do battle with a demon who's traveling through time. Not only was I given that whole scenario, but I was given a very strong, you could almost call it an instruction, to go home and write this thing. And that's what I did. I've never felt more powerfully motivated to write a book in my life. And writing this book, Entangled, was very different from any of the non-fiction that I have written over the last 25 or 30 years. It was a completely different process. I would link it more to channeling than to the kind of intellectual exercise that is involved in non-fiction work. And it's definitely set me on a new and constructive and creative path. And by the way, I'm not alone in that respect, because there are visionary artists in the United States, for example, Alex Gray of the Chapel of the Sacred Mirrors in upstate New York, Robert Venosa and Martina Hoffman in Boulder, Colorado, whose creative work has also been revolutionized by working with this curious